Thanks very much for having us. We appreciate being here. We started the special issue because we noticed that around the world there had been a common focus on well-being or flourishing, whole person education. It seems as if we've reached a time where educators and policymakers around the world are interested in trying to help young people develop as whole human beings, not just focusing on subject matter knowledge, not just focusing on training for jobs, vocational training, but trying also to help young people develop emotionally, relationally, ethically, spiritually, that as young people struggle with different kinds of challenges, if schools completely ignore them and just try to help them learn math and language and social studies, then they miss an opportunity to help people develop in more comprehensive ways. And they also ignore some factors that get in the way of kids learning subject matter. They ignore these other aspects of what young people are going through. Different countries are experiencing this in somewhat different ways. They have different ways of envisioning what whole person education should be. But it seems as if around the world there's a shared focus on trying to think about how do we go beyond subject matter. Everybody thinks it's important that kids learn math and science and language. Of course, that's crucial. But it's just that it's not enough. It's not sufficient. So as these movements have sprung up over the last 10 years or so to think about well-being, flourishing, social and emotional learning, 21st century skills, character education, positive education, there's a whole list of these movements. We notice that not only are people struggling, they're searching, they're hungry for something that goes beyond subject matter, but it seems as if the first generation of movements that address this are too superficial. So people have just started to add in, say, attention to emotions. So they try to help young people recognize what sort of emotional reaction they're having. And that's a useful thing, but it doesn't really help a young person develop as a whole human being. It just helps them recognize emotions or manage emotions in a relatively superficial way. And again, that's not something that we find to be bad. It's better to include that than not to include it. It's just that it doesn't go far enough. So the contributors to this special issue are all convinced that we have to move beyond an exclusive focus on subject matter, but we also have to move beyond a focus on these more superficial ways of thinking about what else we should attend to in schools. So we don't want to focus just on simple techniques for managing emotions or simple techniques for trying to create empathy. We don't want to focus just on moral education in terms of big categories like responsibility, trying to help young people develop responsibility or the sorts of things like that. We also want to help young people flourish in a broader sense. And the terms wholeness and purpose, which we use in the subtitle of the special issue, are our attempt to say this is something deeper, that we need to attend not just to subject matter, not just to social and emotional features, but we need to attend to some sense of kids as whole human beings, a sense of wholeness among them. And we need to attend to some sense of purpose, helping young people get a sense of serving something bigger than themselves, fitting into some larger whole that gives them a sense of meaning as they move forward. And so these are perspectives from around the world. We have Singapore, we have Korea, we have Europe, we have the United States, we have Latin America. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get global perspectives on what could we do to move beyond simple approaches to whole person development. What could we do to try to go a little bit further toward wholeness and purpose? And we're trying to get comprehensive views from various parts of the globe to try to get a feel for how it is people are struggling or thinking about this issue at the moment.
Okay, and I think that's something deeper, and also that's something harder to achieve. Okay, much harder than the academic achievements of students.
Yeah, I think thank you for great explanation. So he say our kind of most important part of why we are doing this in special issue. And as Dr. Wortham a little bit mentioned, that there is a moral education, character education, flourishing, or social and emotional learning, one of the big entity in the United States. They all talk about part, but we are not sure that those kind of various approach make us more confusing. But at the same time, we want to clarify what does that mean. At the same time, what is but we know that we need more than that. And then beyond, we call it well-being, right? So I like to give a little one example is, what are you good at? What brings you joy? What does the world want you to be? So more thinking about as a meaning and purpose of your life. So how we could see in through whole global different context, understand that, and then we could bring as a kind of collective voice to make sense for ourselves, and then to share those ideas to the world, and that's kind of what we try to accomplish through this issue.
So as we get more and more movements in whole person education around the world, there's a tendency that policymakers and educators have to assume that they're all the same. So people often talk about well-being, that's a phrase you hear in many places. And there's an assumption that if we're moving beyond subject matter as our exclusive focus, that then we're all doing the same thing. And that's really false, that there are many divergent perspectives on what it means to educate whole human beings. And policymakers and educators need to think more systematically about which kinds of assumptions do they want to make. Because these different movements make fundamentally different assumptions about who young people are, what human nature is, and what education should be leading them toward. They make different assumptions about what is it to lead a worthwhile human life. And when we, as policymakers or educators or researchers, want to make choices among these different movements, we need to understand a little bit more clearly what we're buying, what it is we're getting when we choose one movement or another. That perspectives on character education, virtue-based education, moral education, tend to be very different than perspectives on positive education and perspectives on social and emotional learning. And those are different than other groups of perspectives. So one of the things the special issue is intended to do is it's intended to give you several perspectives from different parts of the world on what is their particular vision of what educating a whole person should be. And for instance, we just heard this morning from Santiago, who's trying to give us a sense of his vision of whole person education is really focused around a vision of social movements, of trying to articulate how people can be empowered in order to try to take control of their own lives, in order to try to change the social systems that constrain them. And that's one vision of what it is you should be helping young people develop toward doing. But other contributors to the special issue are going to have different visions. Deoksoon is going to articulate a very different vision based in the Korean context and her perspective as a philosopher, how it is that she feels that young people can achieve a sense of flourishing in a way that looks a little bit different than one based in social movements. And so the special issue, we hope, will help readers see that all versions of whole person education are not the same, and that they rest in different traditions, different cultural traditions, but also different philosophical views, and that we need to first understand what the assumptions are underlying any different position, and then make choices depending on your goals and your context of what it is that would make the most sense for you. And so we've tried to get a range of different contributors, and each contributor, we hope, will illustrate one way of thinking about it. And as a reader, you'll be able to see by looking at the whole series of articles, you'll be able to see, hey, there are different ways I could imagine doing this, and then you'll think a little bit about which one suits best your goals and your context.
Okay, I think the readers must enjoy the dialogues between different perspectives and different angles, okay, to focus on this point.
So this, we are having meeting today as a symposium to try to kind of dialogue, to hear other different voices, different cases. So pretty much we are trying to capture each case from the global perspectives. So we can see those each cases as we examine, and then we can make a good implication. So it's not, we are not trying to make a cookie cut saying this is the way you have to do. Rather, where you are, what body of students do you have, and what is your way of you can accomplish. It depends on, just to say that about political, cultural kind of ground they are from. And then we could understand those implications, and then we could do better in education in society. So we are trying to be open-minded hear different voices and collective voices, and then we can share those ideas through the outlet you guys provide, and we are very excited about it. And those energy and power is right there, and then dialogues always bring more than what we could imagine. So we are very hopeful and very exciting, and just look forward to moving forward.
Yeah, we are also very looking forward to your final manuscripts for this special issue. Okay, thank you very much for taking this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.